Okay, our third speaker is Prof. Thomas KVAN, 关道文教授. Prof. KVAN is the founding dean of the School of Design at Southern University of Science and Technology. He is a fellow of Computer-Aided Architectural Design Research in Asia of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors and of the Royal Society of the Arts. His speech is The Contribution of Design. Prof. KVAN, the stage is yours, and you can start your speech.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today and join this conference with such wonderful speakers. Let me now share my slides and take us into the presentation. So, advances in technology excite us with their promises of the future yet to be experienced. Designers delight in the opportunities they unlock through their creative contributions. It's always a pleasure to listen to these dimensions, see the works, and I'm very pleased to see that some of the ideas we're exploring so far today are ideas in common. Let me start with the word design and its related words. They're widely used to denote the composition of elements and arrangement of outcomes. So we hear, for example, in management and in industry, such phrases as designing the process optimally or software architectures. Obviously, these uses of the word are applied with different conceptions and different intentions, and yet we must acknowledge that they have a common meaning. But let me state what I call design. Designers conjecture a better future, test these propositions, and then work out how to realize them. So I'll come back to this later. Here in Sussex, we're starting a new school of design in a University of Science and Technology. I have from the start engaged with the question about how do you position design with science and technology? And how do I explain design to scientists? There are many speakers on the program across this 4 sessions of the conference who are working on similar contexts, but I hope to contribute some of my own thoughts into this discussion. Science aspires to give us reliable facts, but of course these facts are subject to change when we know more. Technology enacts science. Science, design, technology, they're symbiotic. Both design and technology build from science. But I'll focus on science for a moment as it helps to clarify some of the underlying tensions and potentials when we consider how design contributes. Many people have spoken about the links and differences of these fields. Scientists, such as the one you see here, Julian Voss-Andrea, who have expounded on the inspirations they've gained from the arts and how they use the arts to communicate their science. Others draw attention to the distance between these disciplinary groups, and they talk about how we should bridge them. And across the world, there are fights about funding, whether STEM should get funding or whether indeed funding should be different. So there are others who are advocating bringing them together to create the world of STEAM. Now we want to recognize that art has a structural role. Design bridges across these two. It's a dangerous position to be in, as you can see in the picture, and yet we must be a bridge. Many disciplines have now recognized that design is indeed a distinct way of approaching inquiry and research, and popularized by such phrases as design thinking. Now, of course, the scientist relies on design to conduct their work. The functionality of their machines, their equipment, their safety gear, their laboratories, they all reflect design. And yet every scientist would be happy to tell you when those designs are inadequate. It's through design that we, humans, have refashioned ourselves, we've tamed nature, and we've developed along a path that has contributed to a reasonable quality of life for a large number of people. Herbert Simon suggested in 1969 that design is a subset of science. His positive position was that design could be conceived as a solution-seeking process. There's no fixed answer. Several models have been proposed ever since to help this conversation. Others have contributed. And argued that indeed we should regard science as a subset of design. That the first design is science is differentiation, and engineering the realm of composition, and design of conceptualization. So design, when it works, is transformative. Consider the well-known story of OXO. In 1990, Sam Faber observes his wife Betsy struggling to use a vegetable peeler with her arthritic hands. 30 years later, OXO devices are widely used, including those such as by myself, who are lucky not to suffer from any of these infirmities, but who appreciate the convenience of improved proportions and selective use of thermoplastic rubber in some products. Also because the subtle attention to user experience, such as measuring jugs, that you can easily monitor while you fill them. So with that first step of a handle to grip, Faber rethought kitchen experience for safety, for ease of use. And from that ethos, as it has evolved, it has come to articulate a much wider rethinking of experiences from newborns, from babies to elderly. And yet, it's less clear how design can transform the power of science into daily experience for a consumer. So let's illustrate this with another example. Novo Nordisk is a major supplier of insulin for the management of diabetes. Starting in 1920, the company has innovated the production of insulin and its use and developed a chemistry that has adapted insulin to different needs of different users, making it slower or faster acting. The major design intervention came in the 1990s with the Novolet insulin pens that enabled the user to better control dosage and simplified the injection. So the Inolet system addressed the needs of users with poor vision and dexterity, and the Flex pen provided a pre-filled, easy-to-use pen for other people. The devices now are available for young and old, giving them each means to control the dosage and inject easily when they need it, where they need it, without great embarrassment. But design goes further than this. I take a wider view. As I suggested earlier, I think that design is the human experience of intentional conjecturing alternative futures, and then exploring the implications and consequences in the realization of these futures. In this process, design therefore includes bridging the gap between what is and what might be. In conceptualizing and then realizing, we use many techniques and many media. Not everything a designer does can be held in the hand or shown in a photograph. So when we think of a new toothbrush or a new building, it's no different to the urban planner crafting a new policy for a city. Whether we write words or draw lines, the act is the same. We're designing. We engage in a purposeful activity over a period of time to conceive of another future, and then we work, bring it about. So indeed, for many designers, such as the architect Carlos Scarpa, writing precedes or accompanies their drawing. Indeed, mathematics offers a means to model a design concept, just as we've begun to see in parametric design. Our world is increasingly driven by scientific advances and technological implementations. Design, therefore, has a privileged role in contemporary society. Design draws upon the science, not only for advances in molecules, materials, and products, but also for the concepts and understandings of the world in which we live and work. My position is that design is an essential medium of exploration for articulating possible futures that do not exist, and then working with science and technology to discover how to realize this alternative. And thus, the relationship is symbiotic. It's not simply reprocessing and converting science into society. Some designers, such as Neri Oxman at MIT, push materials to their limits and work with scientists to generate new materials and new ways to form them that give them wider purpose. Here, her carpal skin prototype gloves protect against carpal tunnel syndrome with nighttime wrist splinting. These gloves are produced by rapid prototyping to distribute hard and soft materials to custom fit each patient's anatomical and physiological requirements. This work has driven innovations in printing techniques and in composite materials. And here we see how this has led Oxman to explore in her material ecologies work, how we can work with nature to produce structures and objects without destroying it. So here in this example, she's using structures made by silkworms as they spin the silk, so we don't have to kill them in order to extract the silk, and they create this dome. Science also gives designers language to talk about their ideas in more explicit ways, some of which lend themselves to the scientific approach of symbolic representation. So, for example, society is complex. It cannot be described as a system. It cannot be described as a system of systems. The society in its complexity is many overlapping systems, interrelated systems. It is responsive, it's adaptive. So we have the science of complex adaptive systems. It gives us the language with which to explore this. What does this mean for designers? Well, one is that designers cannot conceive of things as a singular chain of decision-making, such as defining a problem, finding a solution, making a product. Second is that design is engaged in what we know as wicked problems. It's a much used phrase, often misinterpreted to mean big, complex problems. In its original formulation, wicked problems means class of issues that cannot be fully defined before we intervene. And when we do intervene, we have redefined context and therefore redefined the problem. So much of the thinking about complex adaptive systems in design has developed at the urban scale. It's applicable also at service design, in product design, in experience design. The healthcare profession has also adopted it to understand patient experience. What's essential to recognize here is that these systems are open, they're adaptive, and they rely on feedback to adapt. In that way, they are not closed systems. Implicit in this description is the recognition that when we intervene, by making a proposition, the situation changes because it now includes our intervention, and that our intervention may have other consequences. So, for example, you might consider Brace's paradox and Nash's equilibrium. When traffic is slow between 2 points, traffic engineers tell us to add more connections. Thus, we build additional roads through cities. That's Nash's equilibrium. The theory of Nash's equilibrium suggests that traffic will benefit as traffic redistributes itself. What Brace showed was the extra connection can actually slow down the traffic. Well, so much for theory. The real-life application of this was seen in Seoul, South Korea, where the river was turned into a motorway by 1976. In 2003, the Cheongyecheong Restoration Project removed this motorway, and the traffic flowed faster without the motorway. Better yet, the natural ecosystem of a river was restored. Nature gained, people gained. The translation of science and technology into society is also informed by design, by the disciplines of the humanities, social sciences, and the fine arts. The adoption of new ideas, new approaches, new substances are all facilitated when the cultural and societal context is appreciated. Rejections of medicine or the quick uptake of new energy sources are cultural phenomena more than they are technological or scientific ones. If we can make these desirable, we can achieve them. Designers participate in this process in a key manner. Good design anticipates and negotiates whether the design is executed through words, such as a well-crafted policy, or such as using particular utensils or experiences, such as rethought patient-focused medical care. Design builds from technology, but relies on the arts and the humanities to bring perspective and insights. We cannot have a discussion about design and technology in 2021, as the previous speaker identified, without returning to the topic of unintended consequences. The mass production and dissemination of fossil fuels some 300 years ago was a threshold moment that precipitated a significant acceleration of discovery, of production, of science and technology. Once energy became location independent and commodified, it could be delivered where it was most productive, such as in cities, in laboratories, in factories, and the nature of society and of life changed. We gained control over time. We control what we do, where we do it, One outcome of this was that mass education became possible as workforce demands changed and child labor ended. With reliable long-distance transportation, scalable production of materials, devices, books, and many other tools of living and thinking, an enormous acceleration of knowledge ensued. Discoveries across the world were enabled, they were communicated, knowledge consolidated and built upon. Yet here we are, in a period where gales, fires, floods abound, storms, both hot and cold, ravage the planet. Discoveries are made, technologies are developed, products delivered. Each in their part contributed to this situation, fueled by the economic paradigm of the growth imperative. In part, causality of simple systems led us to being blind to the complexity and interconnected systems with which natural systems operate. We cannot conceive of what we do as designers within a model of simple systems, nor can we conceive of designing in that way. It's inadequate to conceive of designing as a series of phases where we move from ideation to refinement to realization in a linear manner. Such thinking leads to undesirable outcomes. By attempting to resolve a problem, we create another. Science has tools to help us see our ways forward. For example, complex adaptive systems theory helps us to grasp the non-linearity of design consequences and of design processes. As designers, we help the user, the individual who experiences the result, help them gain a sense of order and ease. Complex adaptive systems rely on feedback. Designers need feedback. They need to act on feedback. So, if design is the enabler for science and technology, then we carry a significant responsibility. But we must be optimistic because in assuming this responsibility, we offer unique value. With our position bridging the humanities and science, we are able to realize a natural systems-focused design process and outcomes. But this is one we should carry with optimism because design is uniquely placed and proven to explore these complexities, these wicked challenges. We just need to stop pandering, to stop pretending design is simple. Design is not achieved by a recipe, following a recipe where linear causal models are simply inadequate. Design is not problem solving because that's simply chasing problems. Design is opportunity making. It's actually problem avoidance. So, what's the frontier of design? Well, from my perspective, it's a step change for design. We must take this time when design is so broadly accepted as an idea and so readily embraced by so many other disciplines to deepen our engagement into all the processes. The frontier is to articulate our value and participation in upstream research and downstream realization in all the disciplines. Our frontier is the integration of ethical and responsible design across the many manifestations and its integration from policy to product. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. We have many questions. I think some of them raised from my colleagues. It's related to the Chinese university. So one question is, you visited many Chinese universities. Do you think there are something new in China's design education and design research?
Yes, China is uniquely placed to lead a very different conversation in design. China has a deep commitment to the responsibilities and potentials in an environment. And therefore, schools of design in China have a policy context in which they are teaching and researching, which is distinctive. Second is, here in Shenzhen in particular, we have a unique opportunity because we are in the center of production for the world. And Shenzhen is the place that employs most of the designers in the world. So here in China, we have the opportunity to change both the education, but also through the education, to change the outcomes and patterns of use of design in all dimensions of it. So I think China is uniquely placed.
Okay. Another question is about the keywords you mentioned, complexity. I think complexity is key when we talk about today's design, especially related to sustainability, the big design area. But how to learn, how to teach, because there's no such courses in today's syllabus or curriculum in most of the universities. How can we teach our students to master the complexity?
Great question. Yes. One of the great challenges of teaching is that we have to discover. That's why teaching and research are so importantly interlinked. We have to do the research to try to work out how to teach complexities. Now, there are courses around in design schools in the world which are addressing complexity and exposing the students to the thinking of it. But in all fields, not just design, complexity theory is a major challenge. We have to make sure we don't scare people off by saying it's complex, but then they say, well, I won't deal with it. No, we have to help them understand that the world in which they're operating, the designing that they're doing, is interconnected, and they can begin to explore the levels of interconnection. They'll begin to develop tools for themselves which help them see where the interconnections are important, and therefore where the value of complexity can be realized. The first step is to get away from simple linear models of design and to stop teaching those, because they are encouraging people to think about simple one-level causality. Let's start talking about how our design outcomes work within the context, the society in which they're introduced, and begin to understand the complexity of their use and then work backwards. That might be one way to start.
Okay. Our last question is about how to organize a team, especially when we want to focus in the area of design. So in a research team where students are from different backgrounds, they might draw a line between different disciplines. So how to lead them to co-creation?
As co-creation is very close to my heart. It's an area in which I've been working for many decades. And much of my work has to do with collaboration, cooperation, co-creation. One of the ways in which I've contributed to that is to distinguish between collaboration, cooperation, and coordination. There are different levels of engagement and risk if you are collaborating with me, you are assuming my risk. I am assuming your risk. If we are cooperating, I keep my risk to myself. You keep your risk. If we are coordinating, we actually don't even care about each other's risk. Now, if you're in a team, you need first to work out what kind of engagement you're working on. We talk about collaboration all the time because it's just the word we use, but often we're not collaborating. So you can co-design by simply coordinating. I'll do my bit, you do your bit, and by bit, we'll work together. Or we can collaborate where we actually engage equally and contribute equally. So going back to the idea of a team, if we come in with different areas of knowledge, we have to respect the value of that knowledge, but also how it can be applied to design. How can a historian help me design? Well, a historian can help me design by giving me perspective, for example. So we need to open ourselves up to different perspectives. I encourage the teams to think about how someone from a different discipline can design, and therefore how they themselves can address design and contribute to it. The most important thing about complexity theory, complex adaptive system theory, is the aspect of feedback. And I bring that back into this conversation. If you want to co-design, listen to the feedback and contribute so that it invites feedback. So your contribution allows others to feed. And that feedback will be the most important part of the collaboration, of the cooperation, of the co-designing. Therefore, in a team, allow people to step out of their box, allow people to stop being the label they came in with, and help them engage in providing the feedback.
Okay, so feedback is the most important thing in a team. Okay, so thank you, Tom. Thank you, Prof. Kevin. Hope you enjoy your life in China, in Southern University of Technology and Design. So see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you very, very much.